Hello, everyone. I'm Mandy Jested from the West Palm Beach office, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to Carlton Field's annual Women's History Month program. To start out, we welcome your questions throughout. We'll also provide some time for questions at the end. Please send your questions in the Q&A function rather than the chat. Thank you very much. And with that, let's get started. Each time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it possibly, without claiming it, she stands up for all women. Maya Angelou. As Women's History Month 2022 comes to a close, I invite us to reflect on how far women have come in the legal profession and on the work that remains to be done. It has only been 40 years since the first woman took the oath as a Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and a Black woman has yet to do so, at least as of today. Only 28 years since the first woman was president of the Florida Bar, and 27 years since the first woman became president of the American Bar Association. We're still counting women presidents of both of those bars in single digits, counting on our fingers until the numbers become high enough to no longer be of interest. This firm is special in that Edith Osman and Gwen Young are among those elite few women who have served as Florida Bar presidents. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Edith Osman, who served as the second woman president of the Florida Bar, as well as president of the Florida Association for Women Lawyers, and Deborah Enix Ross, who is president-elect of the American Bar Association. She will be the second Black woman president of the ABA. Beyond their bar work, these women have other things in common. They have a Bronx connection. They both graduated from the University of Miami School of Law. They raised children while advancing their careers, and they both have very impressive careers. Deborah Enix Ross is a senior advisor to the International Dispute Resolution Group of Debevoise and Plimpton LLP, and a member of the firm's Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council. Edith Osman is a Carlton Fields litigator and mediator, focusing on business and matrimonial law. Both Deborah and Edith are sought-after authors and speakers on their areas of legal specialization, as well as on diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. Thank you so much to you both, Deborah and Edith, for joining us today, and let's hear from you now. We've said that you're both Bronx girls. What can you tell us about your background and how it has shaped your path in the profession? Let's go to you first, Deborah.
Well, first, it's just an honor and a privilege to be here, and I thank you and Edith and everyone at Carlton Fields for this opportunity. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be able to join you on the penultimate day of Women's History Month. So yes, Edith and I discovered over the years that we have a lot of things in common, including our New York City connections. I was born and raised in Harlem and became a Bronx girl when I moved to the Riverdale section of the Bronx, which we thought was the high-end section of the Bronx. But I am a product of New York City public schools throughout, from elementary school through high school. And I say that with pride, and I say that also to underscore the importance of public education and the importance of having opportunities in public education. Because when I was a New York City student, there were a number of programs that were available to us, including the field trip, the school trip, which, when you're a kid, going on a field trip is like fantastic because you're out of the classroom. But the field trip that I took down to the courthouse was transformative for me, because I remember looking up at the judge, who was a man, this man in a black robe, who seemed to have all wisdom. And I said, "Who is that?" And they said, "That's a judge." And I said, "I want to be a judge. What do I have to do to be a judge?" And I was told, "You have to go to law school." So I think that was the early planting of the seeds, but sort of starting in Harlem and in public schools and being exposed to that kind of profession, which I had not seen in my immediate family and circle, because I'm first generation everything, first generation high school graduate, first generation college graduate, first generation law school graduate. But my parents thought that education would be important. And so that combination with the New York City Public Schools, I think, was transformative for me.
Well, Edith, what about you?
So I have a similar but different story to Deborah. I'm a first generation American, so I'm first generation a lot of things. I'm not a first generation college graduate. My parents were both Holocaust survivors, and they lost their families in the wars, and they came to New York and and established a life without any family. So my background was that they firmly believed in education, and they always taught my brother and I that education is the one thing that nobody can take from you. At the same time, they grew up with a fear of what could happen in a country where there wasn't a strong and independent government. And although they didn't really talk to me about it in the way you should do something about it, it became instilled in me that this was, a concern. And I think that had something to do with my fight for rights of various kinds: women's rights, rights for minorities, rights for Jews, rights for whatever it was. I also was a product of the New York City schools. I grew up where Deborah moved. I grew up in Riverdale, but for those of you from New York, that is the she part. But I always say I grew up in the poor part of Riverdale because we really didn't have any money. And I grew up with, not from them, but that same thing that Deborah said. She saw the judge. I grew up with a little bit of a Rocky mentality of how I was going to get to how I was going to get to the top of the steps, or what I was going to do. I didn't really know that at the time, but I kept pushing. And, I had this history of, I remember right after college, something happened and I took a case to small claims court. And that was very invigorating to me. And before I went to law school, because I went a little bit later, I was on a board of my condo, and there were lawyers on the board. And I kind of said, I can do that. So that was a little bit of my path to, I can do that. I can be president of Fall. I can be president of something else. I can be a lawyer. I can be president of the Florida Bar. So that's how my history affected me.
In your ascent of those steps, Edith, what were some of the greatest obstacles and challenges for you specifically, and what's your perspective on what the challenges were for women when you were in law school and started out in the profession?
So I view those challenges and obstacles in a twofold way: internal and external. Internal is your family, it's the things around you, and there were certainly obstacles. I went to law school with a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old because I thought I can do that. I didn't realize how hard
you did.
Hey, right. I did do it. But internally, you have to have, those are obstacles. How was I going to juggle going to law school? How was I going to raise my family? How was I not going to ignore them? And, I was a believer that you can do it all, but there's no question that you can't do it all equally well. I think.
And Edith, you can't do it all the time. Right?
At the same time, right.
Yeah.
So, I believe that internally you need, it helps to have a village. My husband at the time, who I divorced, but not because, I don't think it was because I became a lawyer, was supportive. But I had little kids. I had friends like in law school that would help and take the kids on Saturday morning. Well, let me say, I think women have to be laser focused. Right, Deborah. I remember in my office as an associate on Friday afternoon, and I'd see all the other associates marching by my office getting ready to go to happy hour. And I didn't do that. I stayed till 7 or 8 o'clock at night because in those 3 hours, I caught up with what they were going to do on Saturday after they got up and felt better from having been out all evening, you know. So I had to, we had to be very laser focused in order to accomplish what we want. Um, I think more so than men because a lot of that falls to us. So that was internally. Externally, um, in law school, Deb, you graduated 2 years before me. I didn't really feel a lot of biases in law school. But when you went to get out and you went to apply for a job and somebody says to you, well, who's going to take care of your children? You wouldn't ask that today. You're not allowed to. But they did. They asked me that, like, who takes care of yours? I don't know. Does anyone ask you who's taking care of your children? Or my ex-husband was in medical school. And by then he was a doctor, just a doctor. And they said, why do you want to be a lawyer if your husband's a doctor? So, how you start building that I thought externally in those days was still an issue. I think in the law firms, they don't have the programs we have now. We don't have the realization that we have to help people. I don't think I had the mentoring that the guys had. It was just there were more male lawyers. It was more natural to have somebody that followed you around that was a guy lawyer. So we're still trying to overcome all that, but I'll stop there. I think that gives you my external and internal obstacles. Deb will give you some more.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Edith, because we did both go to the U, yeah, okay, which wasn't the U back then. I think this whole rebranding is fantastic. So I entered law school in 1978 and graduated in 1981. When I entered, I was one of, in the class of about 310 first years, there were 9 African-American students, 5 were day students and 4 in the evening, so 5. And I was one of 2 Black women. Taretha Lundy Thomas, who's a judge in Florida, was my classmate. And so it was just Taretha and me. Taretha and I were the 2 Black women students. Now, this was at the height of the Bakke decision and talking about affirmative action. So I did experience, not from the professors and not from the law school, but from fellow students. And we all know that law students can be difficult, even in the best of circumstances. But there was this sense that I was only in the law school because of affirmative action. And people would say that out loud. And, my response was, well, I don't think that's the case, but I'm not taking the affirmative action bar. So I'm going to be in these classes and take the same classes that you do. And when it's over and I graduate, I'm going to take the bar exam and become a lawyer. And at that point, to get to that point, to be in law school, was such a journey that having these students doubt me was disappointing, but not a roadblock, because I'd already overcome so many obstacles, people not expecting a lot of me, not my family and not my village, as Edith said. My village was partly my teachers and my church, in the Black family especially, churches play a major role. So I had all of that support, but there were people that doubted me along the way. And sometimes I began to doubt myself. And that's one of the things I think we have to be mindful of. We can tell people to be strong, and we can have all kinds of programs, which we do have now, and it's terrific, and mentorship programs and other kinds of, in our firm, we have affinity groups, and that's really helpful. But nothing is going to take the place of your own sense of being and well-being and determination. And, there were moments where I was doubtful, but then, having the support of friends and family to encourage me was really important. And so that's one of the lessons that I would say. We do need to be mindful of the things that we say, how we say them, and how we support one another. And sometimes the people who appear to have it all together, if you really go beyond the look, and the what they're saying, and really think about and look into who they are, that's really important. And I know that has happened to me on a number of occasions, and I've always appreciated it. So there's that pressure. There's, within the school, within your peers. And then when I graduated, so I went to law school thinking that I would be a First Amendment lawyer. And I thought that because I actually went to undergraduate school thinking that I would be a reporter, right? And I had an internship, and this was well before the Me Too movement. And I was assigned to a local television station, and I noticed that the female reporters that got the best assignments were a little friendly with the station manager. And I thought, I need a career where I can have more independence and not be subjected to that. And then I thought about harking back to those days of the judge and thinking about, being a journalist, and put First Amendment together. And then I went off to law school thinking that that's what I would do, and ended up in a career path completely different, in international arbitration. And we can talk, I know we'll talk a bit more about career paths and challenges that you face there, but it is important for us to be mindful of what we say and how we say, and the impact that our words will have on people.
Mm-hmm. So you alluded to it, Deborah, but I'd like to hear more from you about how those obstacles maybe changed or shifted over your career. What drew you to bar leadership, and what was that path like for you?
Yeah, so I think if I look back over any organization that I've been involved in, from undergraduate to even in law school, there was we called it BALSA then, the Black Lawyers Association, Black American Law Students Association. If I join an association, I'm going to get involved. And I joined associations for a sense of community, essentially, in any association that I've been involved in. That's kind of the first thing that draws you to it. I watched my parents, I talked about them not having formal education, but my mom was a real worker and a doer, and that was mostly in church. And so I kind of grew up thinking, if you're involved in, in organizations, then you have to roll up your sleeves and work. So starting with law school with the Black American Law Students Association, and then when I graduated, joining the ABA was like the first thing I did. I was an ABA member as a law student, and I would encourage, law students and young lawyers absolutely to get involved. My goal was to be around what I thought were the smartest leaders in the legal profession, especially in international law, because when I graduated, I didn't have a job. I graduated in 81, was at the height of the recession. So, it was like they say the worst time in a generation to be graduating from law school. We hear that refrain at different periods, but at that point, that certainly felt like it. And so I thought maybe if I were around these lawyers who were so smart and so accomplished, I could learn from them and maybe even get a job, because I didn't have one at the time. And again, if I'm going to be involved, if I join something, I'm going to get involved. So I joined the ABA, I joined the international law section, not practicing international law at all. My first job was in legal services. I'm very, very proud to be a legal services alum, but that is not international at all. But bar associations give you the opportunity to sample other areas of law, to be involved in other areas of law, and to figure out what you may or may not be interested in with some of the best mentors in the world. And so that was the beginning of my establishing myself in the legal profession by joining the American Bar Association.
That's fascinating. And I just received a timely question in the chat that I'll read for you. This one's for you, Deborah, from Josh Marcus. Your career has been in international arbitration. You are tremendously well regarded in that. However, the International Arbitration Bar has been historically a club, and that club has been made up mostly of white males. Is that changing, and how did you get to be recognized in it?
That's a great question from my friend Josh. And actually, Josh is the reason that I know Edith, because through the ABA, Josh introduced us. So when I graduated, it took me 7 years to get my first job in international law, and it was in international arbitration. I became the American representative for the International Chamber of Commerce, the ICC Court of Arbitration. So imagine it's 7 years that I've been wanting to do this. And my job is to go to Paris, like, okay, I think I can sign up for that, and represent US interests at the ICC. I arranged a meeting with American lawyers who were based in Paris. Now, this is before internet and before cell phones and before Google. It was really by telex. And if you were really modern, you had the fax. So kind of arranging all of these meetings. I go to the designated luncheon. We were going to have lunch with this group of lawyers. And I go there and I speak French, or at least I thought I spoke French. And I announce myself, and they won't let me in. They say, no, you can't come in. And so I repeated in French, I'm here for an appointment with these folks. And they said, yeah, no, we understood you. You can't come in. And it's very French. And they literally said it like that. And I'm thinking, okay, is this because I'm Black or because I'm a woman? And it turns out, and this was in 1988, it turns out it's because I was a woman. And women were not allowed at this club. And the men that had organized the lunch, because they were all men, did not realize that, because they'd never had a woman have lunch with them and meet them. So I had two choices. I could leave, I felt like that song in my head, should I stay or should I go? In my head, I was like, it took me so long to get this position. I just can't walk away. So I said to the person, okay, I'm staying. What can we do? And he said, all right, we can take you around the back, up through the kitchen into the private room. I'm a Black woman, right? So coming through the back door is a bit sensitive, but I did it because bigger picture. And I get into the room and all the men look and they say, why did you come that way? I said, well, because this club doesn't let women come up the front steps. And the reason that they didn't allow women in the front is because they had nude portraits on the wall, not kind of pornography, but just, the classics. And they thought women would be offended by seeing women, coming as you're walking up the steps. Now, in my head, I'm thinking, I see that every day. I'm a woman. I know what a woman's body looks like. But it's just the idea that no one had thought about that. So I know it's a long answer, but coming from that till now, we have the first woman who is at the head of the ICC Court of Arbitration. We have a number of women involved in the court, a number of women arbitrators. One of my best friends in the profession is Lucy Reed, who is renowned as an arbitrator. I put her on the list. She was the first woman that I put on the list for Americans. So we've made progress, and we should not lose sight of that, but we should not rest on it, because there's certainly more that we can do.
Wow, that's an incredibly troubling experience, but amazing that you kept the bigger picture in mind and got into that room one way or another and got to the bottom of it. And certainly,
And you can make change, you know, and you
Yes.
you can either take it personally, which it is pretty personal,
right.
when someone says you can't come in because you're a woman, or you can say, I'm going to use that, and how do I put myself in a position that I can try and make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. What about you, Edith? What drew you to the bar and to bar leadership, and what was your experience like?
Well, actually, it was similar to Deborah's in a way. She talked about balsa at the university, and I got involved with the women's organization at the university and other things. But with that, and I was president in my last year, and I invited the president of the Florida Association for Women Lawyers in Dade County to come speak to us. And, you know, she was a young woman and about my age, actually, and we got to know each other. And she invited me to go to a fall meeting while I was still in school, which was part of that. I can do that, but I certainly want to be part of this group. It was a younger group then, and they were struggling and setting up and trying to make a difference. And it provided a forum for women to have friendships, create leadership styles of their own within the organization, from which they could and share experiences. It was a sense of community, as Deborah said, very, very important. And when I got out of law school, I started attending FAWL meetings. And within a few years, I was president of FAWL. Now, mind you, obstacles, again, what are the obstacles? One, home. You know, I still felt it's not that I need permission, but geez, I just gone through law school. I'm an associate working, 2,200 hours a year or something. I have two small kids, and I'm thinking of taking on this presidency. And I said to my husband, they've asked me to do this. What do you think? And he said, do it. And I said, really? Do you understand what that's going to mean? It's okay, do it. Deborah, we talk about, I don't know if we talked about the ages and stages or when you do things. Maybe that wasn't the right stage, actually. In hindsight, I had a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old or something like that, but I did do it. And I actually, at least you can think that your children have a good role model of someone who works hard and cares about what they do. I remember when I was installed, my daughter was at camp, but my little son came up holding roses and handed them to me. And it actually shows all women that you can do that, When I was in law school, people couldn't understand how I could do it with kids. And later they all the more marveled when they had kids. Are you kidding? How did you do that with 2 little kids? But because I went to law school later, I think I always felt like I had to make up ground, I couldn't really wait because it was going to get too long. And if I had opportunities, I had to take them. But I loved FAWL and I wanted to do it. So anyway, those were the internal obstacles. Actually, my firm was supportive, but much as the way firms are now, supportive. That's great. You do it, but you still bill your hours. That I think they were very, they were proud. That wasn't really a problem there. But, other obstacles as you went along, it still was harder for women to get offices. I had I became president of State Fall, and I became involved with the Board of Governors because we had a non-voting seat on the Board of Governors, and I became active in that. I used that seat a lot. And in those days, I'm trying to remember what year it was, but now we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Believe me, the word equity was a dirty word at one point in time, right, Deborah?
Yes.
The guys didn't want to hear about diversity, and they didn't want to hear about gender bias rules. And we were promoting that. I was promoting that as the president. But, I think you had to learn how to do it in a way that people accepted you. And I think that's what I did on the board. Um, you have to be a team player. And, sometimes I'm not really a drinker, but the guys on the board were drinkers. And I remember many a night going out and sitting in bars till 2 a.m, nursing a glass of, Sprite or something so that they think I was drinking with them. So
I've seen you do that.
You see me do that? Yes.
I've seen you do that.
Yeah, I don't
Probably know what you're up to, but don't mind.
Right. Well, I'd have something to start, but I think they had hollow legs. I could never understand. But the point was to be to be accepted. But still, by the time I ran for president, I had some guidance from guys. There wasn't much mentorship from women because there weren't women to mentor you. I was going to be the second president. And there was still a lot of that atmosphere in Florida of the north part of the state was different than the south part of the state. We were like different countries. And, I was a female former fall president, a Jewish liberal woman from South Florida. I don't really think they wanted me to be bar president. There was still that feeling that, my God, they're going to take over. She's going to give all the positions to women. And what's going to happen? But, at that point, fortunately, I had created enough credibility and enough of a reputation around the state from different things I did and from my affinity groups, that I had been involved with, that I actually ended up getting it unopposed. But, there were obstacles, or one good friend from Florida, a guy who had been president of the ABA, of the Florida bar, when I told him that I was going to run, he said, "Really? You sure you don't want to run for Dade County bar president?" No, I don't. I want to run for Florida bar president. So I think those were obstacles, but I had a true love for the profession. And I loved the bully pulpit that came along with leadership. And if that was helping minorities, women, professionalism, whatever it was, that was very exciting to me. And I treasured the people that I met because, as Deborah said so well, it seems like the people that are bar leaders tend to be sort of the best in the profession. And it was a great opportunity to be with them and learn from them. So, long answer also.
There's a lot to unpack there. So, Deborah, Edith alluded to this push-pull. Have you experienced any challenges trying to advance your credibility and reputation personally as a leader, while also trying to advance women's progress in the profession?
Yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? And I don't want to say I was kind of a reluctant leader, but I will say I didn't seek to be, I didn't start out saying I'm going to become ABA president. That's not what I did. I started in the section of international law because I enjoyed it. I met some terrific people along the way. Shout out again to Josh, because Josh Marcus was one who said to me, he and Rona Mears said to me, you could chair this section one day. And I thought, what about me says I want to chair the section of international law? I'm really happy in this committee that I'm working on in international arbitration. It's directly related to my field. I'm enjoying that. And I don't understand why you would even say that to me. And so that's another observation, that sometimes people see in you things that you either take for granted in yourself or not even aware how important it is. Because, it's kind of like people who play a musical instrument and play it really well. It's just it's a gift for them. I think part of what I do and what I've been able to accomplish in leadership is because I'm my authentic self. I know that's kind of a buzzword, but it's really important. And my strengths are different from yours and from yours, Mandy, and from yours, Edith, but they're not diminished because they're different. And I think we have to recognize that and understand and embrace that. So when I looked at the people who were chairs of the international section, I said to myself, I'm not them, and I can't do that. Why would you think that? But then upon reflection, again, if I'm involved in something and I'm asked to serve, I'm going to serve, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. I started to see where I could contribute and what I could contribute and what my skill sets were. And then that became something that I embraced. And I don't think any of us should do any bar work if it's not enjoyable, because there's so much demand on our time, whether like Edith, who I'm marveling at going to law school with children, and then and rising with children. There's a lot of demand on your time. And when I was starting out in the arbitration committee of New York City Bar, I would look around the room. I was the only woman, I was the only person of color, and I was the youngest person by a good 30 years. And I kept saying to myself, why am I here? And the answer was because you are investing in yourself. And I think that's another, I hate to be like here's lesson, I should have been saying lesson number one, lesson number two, whatever this point may be. No matter where we are in our careers, whether we're first year associates or senior partners, we must always remember we are investing in and in charge of our own careers. And so whether it's bar association work or any board that you serve on, it should be enjoyable. It should be something that is meaningful to you, and hopefully is impactful. If you enjoy it and it's meaningful, it's probably going to be impactful. And that was the criteria that I used whenever I would either accept or reject offers and invitations that came to me, whether it was to speak on panels or be in leadership. And as I said to Edith, you're in different phases and stages of your career. And certainly once my son was born, I pulled back a little bit. And there are ways that you can engage and then pull back, but do it in a way where you're not completely lost. And then re-engage when the time is appropriate. And so I tried to keep that in mind. I will say, I think it was easier for me because I had one child. I think if you have, 2 kids or 3 kids, it might be a bit difficult, and I'll explain why. When you have one child, especially if that child is kind of a polite, not a terror, then it's easy for people to say, oh, let me take your, I'm going on a trip, I'll take your one kid, or I'll take your one. But when you got multiple kids, it's like a lot to manage. And so I do think having one child and having a very supportive husband who had more of a 9-to-5 job was very helpful in my career. And then at a certain stage, when I moved to Geneva, we literally moved as a family. Part of it was because I wanted to have a more stable work environment. And believe it or not, moving to Geneva made it a bit more stable, right? Because I was working for a UN agency. It was a bit more predictable in terms of time, and it also helped the career. But there was all of those kind of family considerations in that move. So I think, we have to evaluate where we are in our careers, what's important to us at any given moment, and then make any adjustments that we need to make. And don't be afraid to make those adjustments.
Well said. Deborah, you just answered in part the question that I received in the chat a couple of minutes ago. I just like to read it out now to see if you have any additional thoughts, and also hear from Edith on this. How do you balance being a mother and having a demanding career, especially if your partner also has a demanding career? And what are your thoughts on women leaving the legal profession and or law firms due to that imbalance?
Yeah, this is the age-old question about balance. And it's really important, and it's going to be very personal for each woman. For me, again, as I said, in part, I think having one child made it. I didn't have one child just so I can say, well, it's easier to balance. It's just that's the way it worked out for us. But what I tried to do is say to myself, what are the moments and what are the events that will be particularly important and resonate with my son, right? And so, no, I can't stand up and say I made every soccer game. Like, there are some people who made every one of their kids' soccer game. I did not. I made all of the important ones. I made all of the ones that he felt were important. Mm-hmm. I went on class trips that he, remembered. He doesn't remember the ones I didn't do. He remembers the ones that I did do. And I also established a ritual with my son. Every Friday night, we watched movies and ate sushi. Now, part of that was because I didn't want to cook on Friday night. So what was
I can relate to those Friday night
Friday night, end of the week. And literally, we would put in a tape and watch the same movie. And he would Jurassic Park until I knew all the lines. To this day, I probably know all the lines. But he didn't care. I was there physically. He was, watching, eating sushi, Jurassic Park. That's what he remembers. And we're going to have, as mothers, we're going to be prone to have guilt. But I would say, free yourself from the guilt. Focus on what you can do. Focus on establishing those moments and rituals that will be really important. And don't worry about those things that, not making, unless you want to make every soccer game, then go ahead and do it. If you want to make every Halloween costume, go ahead and do that. If you want to make the cupcakes for the class, do they even do that anymore? You make the cupcakes. I bought cupcakes. I bought Halloween costumes, but I had sushi and movies on Friday night. You see what I mean? So you have to do that. And I think in terms of, you can't do this without supportive partners, family, and friends. You can do it. It's harder. And to the extent that you have that support, don't be afraid to step up and ask for that support. I'll tell one quick story, and then I know Edith has. When I first started traveling, I felt guilty. So my son was little. I made dinners and froze them, right, in little compartments, and said, Monday, I had to schedule everything Monday, Tuesday. I came home early from one trip. So, a day early. And I looked in the house, there were pizza boxes, McDonald's bags, and none of those meals were eaten. And I said to myself, you know what? They're going to survive. If I don't, because I had spent all weekend making all this, I was like, they're going to be okay. They're going to have guy time, and they're going to, and if my son will be okay, and my husband's going to be fine, and I don't have to do everything. And that was liberating. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Edith, do you have thoughts on this? I'm sure you do.
I'm sure I do. Remind me what the exact question was, how you managed to be a mother and
that's essentially at the age-old question, and also the sub part of any thoughts about women leaving the legal profession due to these issues.
So look, we've all touched on it a little bit. I definitely agree with everything Deborah said. Mandy, you asked me something when we were talking the other day. She said, "Are you one of those people that don't sleep?" And that was part of how I did it. I found that when I started working, I was an associate. The kids were in all these, in ballet and in basketball. I had two, and she's 100% right. I always say each child is, geometrically more work. It's not a little bit, exponentially more work. It's not just double, but we have two, you can't get rid of both of them at the same time. And one's napping, one's not, one's with a friend, one's not. So we had to, my ex was a psychiatrist, so he kept long hours too, because patients wanted to be. So, okay, I'll pick up Jackie at ballet at, I take the later one, so I could stay at the office later, till 7:45. I can't tell you how many coaches helped me with my son, picking him up after school or dropping him back off afterward, or one of their friends' moms that would say, I'll take him, pick him up when when you get there, 20 minutes later, just that little relief. I guess what I'm saying is you have to find a way, and you have to realize that way is okay. I would ask the other parents to do the carpools during the week, and I do Saturday. So, okay, we're all working double and triple time now. You've got your job as a lawyer, you've got your job as a mom, and Deborah and I had our job in bar professional activities. They're all full-time jobs, but if you focus on it and figure it out, that's what I would do. So I had to do the Saturday carpools. People would talk about, oh, it's Saturday, and I just think about how many carpools I had to run the whole day and go to games in between. But I think it can be done. I mean, I think I tried to get there for the games. I really actually tried to get there for all of them if I could, or the ballets or whatever it was. Maybe got there a little bit late if they're on a weekday night or something like that. We also did kind of a Friday night activity, tried to do things. I started realizing that it was important that we had our vacation time in the summer, that we did something as a family, that they would remember. So that was something, that was another way of doing it. I would come home late. Actually, I had a blessing while I was in law school. My parents moved to Florida, they retired, and they were willing to take the kids after school, which was a huge help. I didn't have to worry about somebody quitting on me or leaving to see their family in South America or whatever happened with nannies, So they usually tried to feed them, but either I'd feed them again or I'd have a quick bite to eat. Then we were on to homework at 8:30 at night till 10 o'clock at night, till 10:30. They went to bed and I started my homework. And I sat at the kitchen table and I either read things for work, or I had worked all day. Now I was doing my bar stuff from 11 to 1 or 2 in the morning. So is that encouraging for people to say, stay in the profession? No. Everybody doesn't want to do that. Everybody doesn't have the energy to do that. And by the way, neither of my kids are lawyers because they both said I work too hard. So, there's an interest. It's interesting. I think it's really sad to see women leaving the profession. I guess maybe ages and stages and choices. Maybe you need to do something where you can regulate your time more if you want to be super involved with your kids. Don't leave the profession before. I think there are choices. I don't think you have to do that. And it's a real loss to the profession, and law firms resent it if people come and then they leave. They feel like they were training them. But, to our own ladder and our own continuity of building up women who can be partners and who can be leaders and who can be judges. Actually, a lot of women I knew who were very capable wanted to become judges because they had more control of their time that way. Many of the fall women presidents in Dade County became judges. They had more control, and they had a challenging job, and they had respectability in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage people to try and think that through. I think firms are much more adaptable these days, much more so than before, although I understand the difficulties with it. As a firm leader, I understand the difficulties with it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think people could do some part-time work. I always told my husband or husbands that, law is not given to part-time work, because it's not like you could say, I'm going to work from 9 to 12. you're going to work when your clients need you. And one day it might be 9 to 12, and the next day you have a hearing and you've got to stay up till 2 in the morning preparing for it. So you can take on less work, but it is hard to be part-time, particularly in a litigation practice. I can't speak as much to a transactional practice. Maybe Deborah can. I thought you could have more control in a transactional practice, but I see friends who say that's not true. But we've invested a lot. These are bright women, and I would not like to see them leave the profession, and they should seek out mentors that can help them find a way to keep going. They have a gift. They have a gift to themselves, they have a gift to their family, and they have a gift to their community. So I think it's a shame. I wouldn't like to see it happening.
Yeah, I think one of the post-pandemic realizations, I think, will be how can we make adjustments so that, because certainly one of the things that became even clearer during the pandemic is the disproportionate amount of childcare and other care that falls on women and women lawyers. So, we could have been saying that forever, but now it's like abundantly clear.
Right.
So there's that part of the equation. The second part is thinking about, okay, now what do we do about that? And using this as an opportunity, whether it's the work from home, whether it's reduction of hours, whatever it might be, whether it's more virtual meetings so that you cut your commute time and your travel time. We have got to be more innovative in thinking about how we retain women lawyers in general, right? And making it more balanced. And we've had a window into how we can balance our work and our lives. And so we just really need to fully explore that. And I think those firms and those bar associations that help firms figure that out will be really providing a useful service for the profession, because we cannot continue in this way where we lose talented people simply because although they enjoy the profession, they don't find that they can sustain the levels that we had before the pandemic.
Right.
Yes, well said. And I will say, Edith, I agree with you about the challenge of working part-time as a litigator, because I did it. I worked an alternative work schedule as a litigator, and it looked a lot like what you described. Overall, the billable hours were less, but the consistency was not there. So again, as a litigator, you do have to rely on your village. And I just wanted to say as well to that anonymous question poser and anyone else who wants to talk about these issues, my door is always open. So.
Likewise.
Well, we have only about 5 more minutes. I certainly have more questions, but I just wanted to remind everyone that you're welcome to put questions in the Q&A, and I will read them. You can do it anonymously, or you can do it like Josh did and get called out. Either way. I knew about the Josh Marcus connection, so that's why I made clear who the question was from in that instance. But you can post them anonymously.
If there are questions, Mandy, maybe if we only have a few minutes, since we have a unique opportunity to have the president-elect of the ABA with us, and I'm so thrilled and pleased that you agreed to join us, Deborah, here today. It's a very special thing for our firm, and our firm has had its share of ABA leaders, and Florida has had its share of ABA leaders. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about either DEI at the ABA, or what's in store for us as a profession in the next year.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Edith. And I did want to just say a couple of things and what I've been learning as president-elect, because this is your year. There's a year you plan for and there's a year you get. We'll see what happens. But I've been focused, especially these last couple of days, on presidential appointments, and in doing that, looking across the wide range of projects and just opportunities within the ABA. And so I'm really, if I wasn't proud before, I'm really proud of the work that the ABA is doing in so many areas, from voter protection to kind of death penalty to CLE to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really trying to push the profession forward and push society forward at the same time. And that's why, for me, I'm going to focus on what I'm calling cornerstones of democracy, thinking about civics and civility and collaboration. And I think it's really important for all of us, whether you're ABA members or not, which obviously I hope that you would join the ABA and join us in some of this work. But that you understand that as lawyers, we are in unique positions to really talk to society at large about the importance of the rule of law. They may not understand the phrase rule of law, we do as lawyers, but they certainly understand and see that the amount of lack of civility in our society. And I said I wasn't going to say it, but the highest demonstration of that is what happened at the Oscars the other night. I mean, if that's not a lack of civility, and that's a world stage, and that may be just fun in the entertainment area, but I think it speaks to what we really need to get a hold of in society. We have to educate our folks about the three branches of government, what they're supposed to do. We have to educate people on how you can disagree and not have it devolve into what we've seen around the world. And we have to maintain and uphold all of the core principles of the legal profession. So we're doing that in the ABA, but we need everyone engaged on this. This is what I would say is a full court press is needed, and we need all of you to be involved in whatever level it may be. And so you'll be hearing more from me about how we can roll that out to state and local bars and to law firms and lawyers and firms. But we really, this is, I think, a moment that we need to seize and rise to the occasion.
If I could add something to that, our firm has been historically very involved in the ABA. We've had a lot of chairs of sections, and in terms of some things we didn't touch on yet, I do encourage people to be involved in their sections. I think it's a great form of professional development and a great form of networking and referral building. But also, even if you're not, I encourage it. I'm a state delegate now, and after I was bar president, I've become involved more with the ABA, and I so much admire the work. And I think it's important for lawyers to realize that it is the only voice of the profession on a national level. And when we need somebody to speak up for the profession, if it's taxes, if it's Congress trying to have taxes passed on legal services, or if it's for legal services, it's the only place we have a voice. And being a strong ABA with a strong membership is important professionally. So I'll give it a little plug for us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. When you're a litigator, you always let the closing argument, you don't add to it. So the best closing there.
Thank you.
Wonderful closing arguments. Thank you so much, Deborah and Edith. Really appreciate you both taking the time to talk with us today. Thanks to everybody who joined us, and happy Women's History Month.
Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day, everyone.
You too.